What more can you add from this incident last night?
Well, our agents were out doing what they're doing every single day across this country, is they were doing targeted enforcement, going after individuals that are breaking federal law. When this individual drove away, crashed his car, tried to run into a home, and as they were wrestling on the ground trying to detain this individual, two other men came out of that building and started attacking him with weapons and shovels and brooms. And as it was 3-on-1, the agent feared for his life and defensively had to take action. But, this kind of violence is perpetuated by what we hear the governor saying, what we hear the mayor in Minneapolis saying, and their irresponsibility is extremely reckless. Governor Tim Walz has my phone number. I have called him and talked to him and said, listen, you let your city burn down in 2020.
Even ICE and Border Patrol agents are now publicly contradicting their own boss. Let that sink in. The head of Homeland Security went on national television and told a dramatic story about agents being ambushed, beaten with shovels, nearly killed. It was explosive. It was emotional. It was political dynamite. And now, the acting head of ICE says it didn't happen that way at all. Back in mid-January, right in the middle of several high-profile incidents that already had tensions running high, the narrative pushed to the public was clear. ICE agents were attacked by migrants after a chase, outnumbered 3-1, forced to fire in self-defense. Photos were shown, words like terrorists were thrown around. The message was unmistakable: our agents are under siege. That story was used to justify tougher crackdowns, more operations, more urgency, more fear. But fast forward, and suddenly the foundation of that story is cracking. The acting head of ICE announced that video evidence reviewed by ICE and the Department of Justice shows 2 officers may have given false sworn testimony. They've been placed on administrative leave. The U.S. Attorney's Office is now investigating. Lying under oath isn't a PR problem, it's a federal crime. That's not a minor correction, that's a complete reversal. And here's where it gets even more troubling. When some of the migrants charged in the case said the official version wasn't true, there were attempts to deport key witnesses. Think about that. The very people who could testify about what actually happened were almost removed from the country before the facts were sorted out. It took legal action and a federal judge stepping in to block those deportations. Only after witnesses were protected, only after additional video surfaced, only after scrutiny intensified did the story change. That's not how a transparent government operates. In a normal situation, when facts are still being gathered, officials say exactly that: we're investigating. We'll provide updates when we have verified information. You don't go on national TV and present an unverified narrative as absolute truth, especially not when it involves life or death allegations.
100%. Imagine, Ben, a world without video, or without the dozens of video, which are as a big part of what the protesters are doing in the street to chronicle it. This is so far upriver from any normal government and Department of Justice. Typically, they'd go forward, say things, maybe you'd have to probe, etc. But the reflexiveness of the complete absolute fiction. And then don't you love that extra little step of, as she did on Fox, as she did on her statement, blaming it all, the it, of course, being complete fiction, on Walz and on the governor of Minnesota. So just making it into a political football. This is straight out of the playbook of totalitarian societies. This is what George Orwell and Hannah Arendt have told us about, the absolute aggressive move to control a narrative without any regard to what the facts are. You're very well taken to include the Renee Good shooting here, because again, right out of the box with no facts at all. By the way, what you say is exactly right, because you're not supposed to, if you're in law enforcement, you don't want to prejudice a case, which they just do every day by coming out of the box and saying, oh, it was a terrorist, or these are the things that happen.
What makes this even more alarming is the pattern people are pointing to. Time and again, there's an immediate rush to frame incidents in the most politically charged way possible. Bold claims, emotional language, blame assigned within hours, And only later, sometimes much later, do the inconsistencies surface. Without video, without lawyers pushing back, without judges intervening, how many of these stories would simply stand unchallenged? That's the bigger question. Because this isn't just about one incident, it's about credibility. When leaders amplify a dramatic version of events that later collapses under scrutiny, trust erodes.
It also, I have to say, encourages, more than encourages, basically has the wink and a nod and not such a wink to ICE and CBP to say, don't worry, you lie, we'll lie too, we've got your back. Whatever kind of nice noises, and there aren't even very many of those, we make in the public realm, you go on and be as savage and nasty as you like, aggressive, go after people with no provocation, etc., and we'll back you up. How? By lying about it. That is the most, that's a matter of complete indifference to this administration. There's really no doubt. We talk about comparing, Reconstruction, Jacksonian democracy. We've never had an administration that's just there. It is exactly like Soviet Russia or Russia or Hungary. The immediate words out of their mouth are going to be completely designed for political reasons, and there's just no regard for the truth. This is a cabinet official, right? A national person, to not have her at least make a phone call. Is this going to hold up or whatever? And you got to think in a way it comes from the top, and the most obviously promiscuous liar in presidential history. Because typically somebody being found out like this, you go on, you make a big deal, and it's all complete bullshit. That would not be countenanced in a normal government because it so undermines credibility. That just doesn't matter to these guys.
And once public trust erodes, it's incredibly hard to rebuild. There's also a chilling effect when officers believe leadership will automatically back any version of events. It sends a message, intentional or not, that narrative control matters more than factual precision. And that's dangerous territory for any democracy. One of the most striking parts of this whole situation is how quickly assumptions were made. Labels were attached, political opponents were blamed, entire communities were implicated, all before the evidence was fully examined. Now, investigators are sorting through what actually happened. Careers may be on the line, criminal exposure is possible, and the original story that dominated headlines looks very different. If not for video footage and legal pushback, the public might never have known. That's why transparency matters. That's why due process matters, and that's why the rush to control a narrative can be so destructive. Because once the facts catch up, the damage to credibility is already done.